Tonight, a seismic shift in American policy and global economics is sending shockwaves through boardrooms and government halls around the world. The decision handed down today is not just a headline, it's a turning point that will be studied for years to come. In a landmark decision, the Supreme Court has struck down President Trump's sweeping tariff regime, dismantling a key pillar of his America First agenda and upending the rules of international commerce. The ruling immediately reverberated through global markets, with investors and trading partners scrambling to assess the fallout. The court ruled that the president overstepped his authority, encroaching on powers that the Constitution reserves for Congress alone. Legal scholars say this is one of the most significant checks on executive power in decades, setting a precedent for future administrations. For businesses and consumers, this decision ends months of uncertainty and disruption in global trade. Companies that had been forced to navigate unpredictable tariffs can now begin to plan for the future, while shoppers may soon see prices stabilize on everyday goods. But the ruling also creates a new challenge. The Treasury now faces the daunting task of refunding up to $1 trillion to businesses that paid these now illegal tariffs. This unprecedented refund process could take months, if not years, to fully resolve. This is more than a budget issue. It's a massive wealth transfer that could reshape the economy, affecting everything from corporate profits to government spending. Economists warn that the sudden influx of capital could spark new investment, but also create volatility in financial markets. The business community is breathing a sigh of relief, while the White House is furious, calling the decision a blow to presidential authority and national security. Protests and celebrations erupted in cities across the country, reflecting the deep divisions this issue has caused. Now, a new political and economic battle is brewing in Congress, as lawmakers debate how to respond and what new trade policies should look like in a post-tariff era. This wasn't just about import duties, it was a test of the separation of powers at the heart of American democracy. The case has reignited debates over the limits of executive action and the role of the judiciary in checking presidential power. The core question, can a president unilaterally impose a nationwide tax without Congress, has now been answered, with implications that reach far beyond tariffs and trade. Today, the Supreme Court drew a clear line, reaffirming that taxing and regulating commerce is Congress's job, not the president's. This decision restores a crucial balance of power in Washington. The era of broad, presidentially decreed tariffs is over. Trade negotiations will now require more consensus and transparency, with Congress playing a central role. As the world watches, a new and uncertain chapter in global trade has just begun, one that will test the resilience of economies, the adaptability of businesses, and the strength of democratic institutions. To truly grasp the significance of today's Supreme Court ruling, we need to rewind and understand the origins of the Trump tariffs, a story that reshaped the global economic landscape and ignited fierce debate across the nation. It all began at the dawn of Trump's second term, when the administration doubled down on its promise to put America first in global trade. In response to mounting concerns over the opioid epidemic, the administration introduced aggressive fentanyl tariffs, targeting countries accused of flooding the U.S. with illicit drugs and chemicals fueling the crisis. But by April 2025, the White House went much further, imposing a sweeping 10% tariff on nearly all imports. This move marked a dramatic escalation, far broader than the targeted tariffs of the past, and affecting everything from electronics to everyday household goods. Branded as reciprocal tariffs, the administration argued this bold step would force other nations to lower their own trade barriers, leveling the playing field for American workers and businesses. Officials claimed these tariffs would spark a new era of prosperity, reduce America's trade deficit, and even pressure foreign governments on issues like intellectual property and national security. Yet, as the tariffs took effect, business owners and economists sounded the alarm, warning that these measures would ultimately act as a tax on American consumers and companies, not on foreign competitors as intended. Supply chains, already strained by years of global disruptions, were thrown into further chaos. Delays, shortages, and rising costs rippled through the economy, affecting everything from manufacturing to retail. Major companies like Purdue Farms and J.M. Smucker publicly blamed the tariffs for surging costs, operational uncertainty, and the threat of layoffs, adding fuel to the growing controversy. Ironically, the very businesses the policy aimed to protect became its most vocal critics. organizing protests and demanding relief from Washington. With the nation divided and economic stakes rising, the stage was set for a fierce legal and political showdown, one that would ultimately land before the highest court in the land. Imposing such sweeping tariffs required a powerful legal basis. The Trump administration bypassed traditional trade laws, invoking the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEPA. IEPA lets the president regulate international commerce after declaring a national emergency, but was never meant for broad tariffs. The White House cited the fentanyl crisis, immigration, and trade deficits as emergencies justifying extraordinary action. Critics argued IEPA was being stretched far beyond its intent, transforming a tool for targeted sanctions into a mechanism for massive new taxes. The Constitution gives Congress, not the president, the power to tax. The administration insisted IEPA's authority was intentionally broad, but opponents said only Congress could rein in such overreach. This set up a direct constitutional conflict: emergency powers versus legislative authority. The courts would have to decide if this was bold leadership or dangerous overreach. Legal challenges erupted nationwide as the controversial tariffs sent shockwaves through the business community and state governments alike. Lawsuits were filed in rapid succession, each one questioning the legality and constitutionality of the president's sweeping actions. A coalition of businesses, trade associations, and state attorneys general argued that the tariffs crippled their operations, threatened jobs, and violated the Constitution's careful balance of power. They claimed the president had overstepped, using emergency powers in a way Congress never intended. Federal judges across the country repeatedly sided with the plaintiffs, issuing injunctions that blocked the tariffs from taking effect. In their rulings, judges found the president likely exceeded his authority under the law, raising serious questions about executive overreach. The administration faced a patchwork of injunctions and mounting defeats in courtrooms from coast to coast, creating confusion and uncertainty for businesses and policymakers. Desperate for clarity and a final resolution, the White House petitioned the Supreme Court, seeking to consolidate the major lawsuits for a decisive showdown that would settle the issue once and for all. The court agreed to hear the case, fast-tracking oral arguments and signaling the urgency and national importance of the issue. The eyes of the nation turned to Washington. In the Supreme Court, plaintiffs argued that allowing a president to use IEPA in this way would erase Congress's constitutional role in trade and taxation, undermining the very foundation of American democracy. If a president could declare a trade deficit an emergency and impose any tax or tariff, what was left of the separation of powers? The case raised fundamental questions about checks and balances. The world watched as the Supreme Court prepared to decide the future of American economic policy, with international media and foreign governments closely monitoring every development. The stakes were enormous. The very nature and limits of presidential power and the future of the nation's system of government hung in the balance. The stage was set for a historic confrontation, one that would echo through the halls of power for generations to come. In the Supreme Court, the debate cut to the heart of American governance. The Trump administration argued that IEPA gave the president broad power to act in emergencies, including imposing tariffs. The justices pressed, if a president can declare a trade deficit an emergency, what limits exist on executive power? The plaintiffs countered that the Constitution gives Congress, not the president, the power to tax and regulate trade. They argued that allowing unilateral tariffs would upend the founders' design and erode checks and balances. The court explored IEPA's history, noting it was never meant to grant unchecked power. The real question, can national security tools be used for sweeping domestic economic policy? The answer would reshape the balance of power. The Supreme Court's decision unleashed an economic shockwave. Immediate winners, thousands of businesses now owed up to $1 trillion in refunds. For many, this cash is a lifeline after months of financial strain. But for the government, it's a fiscal nightmare, lost revenue, and a massive budget hole. The administration's promise to cut deficits is in tatters. For consumers, relief will be slow. Prices may not drop for months as retailers work through expensive inventory. Globally, trading partners are cautiously optimistic, hoping for normalized relations. But the damage, rerouted supply chains, lost trust, won't be undone overnight. The ruling ends the trade war, but not its consequences. Rebuilding global trade will be a long process. The shockwaves are only beginning. This case was about more than economics. It was a battle over the Constitution. The central question, who controls trade policy? The Constitution gives that power to Congress. Over time, Congress delegated some authority to the president, but always with limits. The Trump administration's use of IEPA tried to turn a limited delegation into a wholesale transfer of power. The Supreme Court decisively rejected this, reaffirming that taxing and regulating commerce is Congress's job. The ruling sets a precedent. Presidents can't use emergency powers to impose broad-based taxes. It's a victory for constitutional order and a check on executive overreach. The debate over presidential versus congressional power isn't over, but Congress's authority is now reinforced. The balance of power has shifted back to the legislative branch. What if the court had ruled the other way? Experts warned it would have let presidents impose nationwide taxes without Congress, upending the Constitution. Any issue could be declared an emergency, giving the White House sweeping economic control. Today's ruling restores stability and predictability to trade policy. Businesses can plan, knowing Congress, not the president, sets the rules. But the political fight over trade isn't over. Congress must now debate the future openly. The decision clarifies who makes the rules, not what those rules should be. The arena has shifted, but the battle continues. The Supreme Court has ended the era of broad, unilateral tariffs. The ruling is a victory for the rule of law and the separation of powers. Businesses must now claim refunds and push for stable, sensible trade policy through Congress. The chaos of the past year shows the dangers of unpredictable executive action. Now, industry and lawmakers must work together to craft a modern trade framework. The White House must respect the court's decision and collaborate with Congress. Congress must reclaim its constitutional authority and lead on trade. For the public, this is a reminder. Checks and balances matter. The future of global trade is back in the hands of the American people. The next chapter will be written in Congress, and by you.